You are listening to the Scars and Guitars podcast. My name is Andrew Mackay-Smith, and this is my conversation with the frontman and bassist for a band called Red Fang. His name is Aaron Beam. Red Fang are touring Australia with a band called Drunk Mums. Love that band name. The tour is through May. I'll read out some dates quickly. Thursday the 10th, they're playing the Brightside in Brisbane. Friday the 11th, they're playing the Cambridge Hotel in Newcastle. Saturday the 12th, they're playing Manning Bar in Sydney. Sunday the 13th, they're playing the Corner Hotel in Melbourne. Tuesday the 15th, they are playing the Barwon Club in Geelong. And finally, on Wednesday the 16th, they are playing Fowlers Live in Adelaide. Let's hear what Aaron has to say. Here we go. Wonderful. Okay, Aaron, welcome to the show. Tell us about the show that Red Fang are bringing down to Australia, because you are touring with the absurdly and also brilliantly named Drunk Mums.
Yeah, and we're excited to be doing the tour with them, doing a little package with them. We had a list of different support band possibilities sent over to us when we first looked into this tour as a possibility, and they stood out from the rest, and for sure. And then we were also told by the local the guy arranging the tour in Australia that they have a pretty good draw down there. So it's exciting to be able to do a package tour coming down this time. Last time it was just us on our own. And so, there's something about the predictability of having another band that's going to be the same every night. It's pretty nice.
Yeah, sweet. And have you got a lot of feedback from Australian fans and listeners over the years? In other words, is there a demand for you to come down to Australia evident from the communication flow?
I feel like as much as any place, the most common form of seeing support, or whatever you want to call it, is basically whenever you post something on any kind of social media, and then immediately people's reaction is, come to Madison or come to Australia or whatever. So, we get about the same number of requests for Australia as we do for Madison, Wisconsin. And of course, the way that stuff usually works, it'll be like, we'll post something about playing in Minneapolis, and we just played Madison 2 nights earlier, and somebody will write, inevitably will write, come to Madison, and we'll say, we were just there 2 nights ago, you idiot.
Yeah, Jamie Jaster on his podcast talks a lot about that. He gets hit up a lot when he goes somewhere, and then exactly like what you're saying, someone a day or two later says, why don't you come here? And it's like, for God's sakes, we were just through there. Do you not look at social media? I mean, they're commenting on your band's posts. So what do you think goes on? I mean, Jesus.
Right. It's pretty hilarious to us at this point. I mean, I'm not on any of those social media. I just kind of see some of it. It filters through sometimes, but yeah. But no, as far as like the other thing, I guess, as far as, feedback and demand for coming down there, we wouldn't have gotten asked to come back by the local promoter if there weren't enough of a demand down there. So I hope. So, ticket sales look like they're pretty good. So I think we'll have some pretty good shows while we're down there.
Look, your style of music, I remember as far back as when Entombed started touring Australia in the early and mid-90s. And then there were bands like the Helicopters that split off that. And then, of course, there was Fu Manchu. And it really goes right back to Blue Cheer, because the sound that you guys produce to me sounds a lot like what Blue Cheer were doing back in the day. There's a big demand, or there's certainly a rather sizable audience for that type of rock and roll down here in Australia. It just seems to suit our country's musical narrative.
That makes sense. I mean, I guess if you think about especially the Bon Scott era of AC/DC, was it was like had at least the same energy to it. Musically, it was a little bit cleaner, sort of like more user-friendly, but had that same sort of like just disregard for politeness, I guess.
Yes.
Maybe that's the best word I can come up with for, right now, is that just sort of that there's a lot of sneering, I guess, in that kind of music. And we don't sneer, but I do think that we're not really trying to fit into some sort of a conventional mold as far as the music, the music that we're actually producing. So
Yeah, I like that about you guys, actually, because, yeah, all the rock and roll you've mentioned is rock and roll with a very stiff middle finger, but you guys have a wicked sense of humour at the same time. So in preparation for the conversation, I found some vids on YouTube, specifically your bass play along.
Oh, yeah.
Because I'll let you know, I'm a musician, I'm a bass player and a guitarist, but primarily a bass player. So I thought,
Okay.
God, for Relapse Records, this is going to be a bit unusual having a bass play along video because there's very few of them online, you're probably aware. And I thought I'll sit down and I've got my.
I wasn't aware, honestly, because those sorts of things, I just don't. Honestly, I pay zero attention to that kind of stuff. But sorry, go ahead.
Oh, I just thought it was hilarious because I honestly sat down expecting to see a bass play along video to one of your tracks, but then it became apparent that in Australia we call it taking the piss, and I appreciate it. I thought it was hilarious.
Oh, good. I think some people were kind of a little bit irritated with it, but I just feel like. I've seen a number of play along videos, and I remember, when I was a 15-year-old and trying to learn how to play guitar, it was buying like Guitar World magazine and getting the tabs for a Metallica song or whatever it was. That was the way you did it. And then I remember reading a story about James Hetfield saying he didn't know how to read music at all, and some kid brought him a tab and was like, "This Master Puppets, this section sounds weird to me. I'm not sure if this is right. Can you fix this for me?" And he was like, "Oh, sure." And he grabbed it and rewrote a bunch of the notes, but he said he had no idea what he was even writing. And so he's just totally screwing up this kid's idea about how the song went. But,
hilarious.
I guess I kind of feel like it's a little bit of taking the piss, but I also think that there's there's something to be gained from, the trying to figure that stuff out yourself, like figuring it out by ear and figuring out how to play those things the way that you would play them and not play them the way that somebody else is going to, because everybody's hands are a little bit different and everybody's kind of, everybody's style is a little bit different. And so you don't, in my opinion, I don't ever want to play something, even if I'm doing a cover, I don't want it to sound exactly like the famous version of that song. I want it to sound like my version of the song. And my version of how I play the bass. And so that's part of the reason why I did that, but also because I also think it's kind of funny, the idea of me showing somebody how to play bass, since I don't really consider myself that great of a bass player.
Well, you can certainly keep a rhythm going. There's no doubt about that. So I'll ask you about your bass playing. What got you mentioned that you started playing guitar in your teens. So what encouraged you to switch across to the bass guitar and pursue that as a professional instrument?
It was against my will, basically. The first time I played bass was as soon as I moved out to Portland. I had been playing in a band where I was playing, it was two guitars and bass and drums, and then moved out with one of the guys who had been in my high school band, and it was like, well, I guess you've been playing guitar longer, so I'll play bass. And then once Red Fang started, originally it was me and David and John, and Brian wasn't in the band yet, and I was playing guitar. And then Brian moved back, and basically neither of those guys can play bass. And I had one, and I could play it. And so I took over sort of against, a little bit begrudgingly, but then I quickly realized that it's way easier to play bass when you're totally shit-faced. And so I was like, fuck it. I was a little bit like taking a little bit of my frustration out by just intentionally writing parts that seemed like the kind of like dumbest version of the guitar part that I could come up with that would still work. But ultimately, I think it actually was better that way. I feel like my bass playing before Red Fang was like overly complicated because I was kind of trying to make up for the fact that I was really a guitar player at heart. And as a result of the sort of Red Fang shift, I started playing much simpler, more direct to the point bass lines, which is a lot more effective. I mean, that's what, some of the bass lines are, at least for that kind of music, like Jaco Pastorius playing along with Joni Mitchell is a whole other story, but that's not what we're doing. So.
Oh, God, yeah. Yeah, you mentioned some really interesting things there and on-point things too, because I do play, I'm a covers musician effectively. I don't play in an originals band anymore. And I play a lot of funk and disco numbers, and there simply aren't tabs out there that are correct when you're trying to play along to September by Earth, Wind and Fire or any of those sort of songs. So or even when you start going into stuff like Bernard Edwards bass lines in Chic, for example, there isn't anything out there that actually even comes close to that. There are some pretty cool things online, on YouTube play along clips online, but you've really got to go over those bits over and over them. So it's really important that you mine your own creativity in that scenario, I find. And what you're talking about, even with your originals, when you're playing in Red Fang, that's what you're doing. You're mining your own creativity. You thought, bugger the sacred cows, I'm just going to do this thing my way.
Yeah, exactly. And I've played, and I've done plenty of cover things myself. I played in a Jesus Lizard cover band a long time ago, playing guitar.
Oh, nice.
And there's no way to find guitar parts for this, so I just had to make stuff up on my own. And then, like, after the fact, we only played a couple shows. After the fact, I saw some video of, oh my God, I can't believe
Dwayne Dennis is a heck of a guitarist. Yeah.
Oh my God, so good.
Yeah.
But playing, songs that I'd figured out my way of playing them, and then seeing that he just has he's in a totally different part of the neck, and is like playing with, he's barely moving his hands at all, because he's just doing he's doing like jazz shapes that I don't know. So I'm just doing it I'm like jumping all over the neck, and it is more or less the same notes. It just sounds a little bit different. So
yeah, gosh, that's a fantastic band. Jesus Lizard, so underrated. So
God.
How did you get into or what was the inspiration behind a covers band for Jesus Lizard material? Was this the early 90s or the mid 90s, was it?
It was 2 years or so after they had broken up, and it was actually a friend of mine, a Portland guy who was one of the sort of worked for a local promoter, and had played in bands that I'd played with for years, just in the like tiny Portland scene that was back then. And his 30th birthday was coming up, and so he just asked me, he wanted to do it really badly for his 30th birthday. So I said, sure, I'll do it one time. It seems too early because the band had just broken up. But, because this was like 16 years ago or something.
Yeah.
And maybe even longer. But, and it was super fun. So we ended up doing another one about a year after that. And then I think that was it for me, but they kept going. They played a couple more shows after that.
So, yeah, well, that's a great story, and something I'll share with you is that I think Dwayne has written one of the most, it's one of the most emotional, I don't know how else to say it, okay, so it'll sound a bit sappy when I say this, but one of the most emotional guitar lines that I've ever listened to was his work on a track by a band called Tomahawk, the one that he did with Dave Lombardo, and not Dave Lombardo, Mike Patton, it was the Mike Patton vehicle, but the cut, the sweet smell of success, that guitar line is just brilliant.
I'm going to have to listen to it because they were on the Soundwave tour when we did that tour in Australia back in 2014 or 13. Is that right?
Okay. Yeah.
Yeah, and I went and I was watching. I had to say something to him because I knew he knew of the existence of the cover band that I'd been in just through the grapevine, and so I had to go tap his shoulder and say something because we're all standing side stage watching Slayer, and he was there, and so I sort of meekly introduced myself, but I'm not sure if he even understood any of the words as English coming out of my mouth. So.
Okay, cool. Hey, I've only got a few minutes left, so I've got to ask you this question here. When you appeared on Saturday Night Live, Paul Schaefer sat in with the band, playing organ during the performance of the track Blood Like Cream. So what was that like?
Oh my God, it was so great. So they asked us ahead of time if we wanted to have Paul play on the track, and I immediately was like, well, of course. I mean, he was in Spinal Tap, and he's an amazing musician. Some people used to make fun of him for fitting in with every single band, but I'm not going to pass up that type of an opportunity. So, and he came in, or the dress rehearsals for the tapings, they do the Friday taping on Thursday, and so we actually had to load in to the studio at, I think it was 5:45 a.m. or something.
Jeez, yeah.
And did a bunch of dress rehearsals. We ended up getting to run through the song a bunch of times, and Paul actually, I think we came back again at 10 or 11 or something. He came in and actually ran through the song with us 4 or 5 times because he wanted to make sure that he had it right and had it all down. Mm-hmm. And then when it was time to actually go, we came back in the evening, and he caught me in the elevator, and he had a chart written out, and he was, asking questions about, at this point, do you want me to do this? Like, would it be better to do this kind of like slide down, or should I do this thing? And so we're actually kind of like, going over last minute notes about how he should do the performance. And, and I thought that there's organ on I think there's organ on the album track, but yeah, having him on there was pretty great because he's such a professional, and he basically just everything that I communicated in my sort of like Neanderthal way, he was able to instantly translate into, a musical version of that on the organ. It was great.
Yeah. All right, mate, I'll leave it there. Thank you so much for the conversation. It's been fantastic, actually. I'm glad we could talk about all those different things. So good luck on the tour of Australia, mate.
Yeah, me too.
And I'll definitely try to get along to some of the shows, as we mentioned before. You are listening to the Scars and Guitars podcast. My name is Andrew Mackay-Smith, and that was my conversation with a fella called Aaron Beam. He's the frontman and bassist for a band from the United States of America called Red Fang. Really appreciate you listening.